Alright, and welcome back to the channel, buddy, and I hope you're doing fine. Today we're gonna talk about how can I prepare my Mini for the perfect paint job. The video will have 3 parts. In the first one, we're gonna talk about all the tools that you need to follow this video. In the second one, I'm gonna build the Minis in a little bit more advanced way. So as good as I can to have an easier time later and to really elevate my paint job at the end. And then in the third part, we're gonna talk about how can I build a lot of Minis and how can I build them fast, but still decent enough that I have not too many troubles later during the paint job. So for that, we're gonna use then a City of Sigma box, beautiful, that I definitely will play one day. Absolutely. Yeah. As always, there are timestamps in the description, so if you're only interested in certain topics, you can jump straight to them. And with that, I'd say, let's go. Okay, first I would like to share all the tools that I'm using for prepping my Minis. First, a toothbrush and a tiny bucket. We will also need some pliers, ideally with a flat surface on one side, a hand drill, I prefer the 1mm variant, various hobby knives, some clamps, some tweezers, when it gets a little bit more delicate, files with various grains, plastic and super glue, yes, you will need both, cork, some bases, and some wire. That's it. Okay, so let's see how we can assemble this exalted hero of chaos the best way possible. Now you're probably wondering, why should I put so much effort in the pre-paint job? And honestly, there are multiple reasons to do that. First of all, your paint job might suffer at the end if you're not doing a good prepping job. For example, you're not getting rid of excess plastic, or the mold lines are still there and they will catch all your paint. It's not great. What I'm about to show you is not something that I do when I build a complete army. This is something that I do for centerpieces, for competition painting, or if I just wanna make sure, hey man, I did my best, even if the result at the end is, you know, no go demon, obviously. Another thing that you should keep in mind is, well, how do I put this, brush accessibility? So, lots of units, they come with shields. They go to war, they want to protect themselves. Makes kind of sense, right? But painting the back of the shield is not fun, especially when the model is already fully assembled. It's getting even worse the moment you want to paint cavalry. So ideally, the rider is separated from the horse and then you have the shield on an extra piece. Now, that's of course lots of work, but I personally think it's worth it. I try though to assemble as much as possible, because if you're not assembling the model, you will have paint or primer everywhere where you want to glue later. You can of course scrape that off a little bit, but difficult. So right here, I think I will assemble the whole Mini with exception of the cloak and the hat. We will talk about that though while we assemble the Mini. Okay, let's get started. We will do this step by step. Building GW Minis, for example, is super simple, but there are still a few tips and tricks I'd like to share with you. Follow the instruction booklet and clip the single parts out of the sprue. Get some pliers for that. Ideally, you have some that have a flat side. That way you can get close to the part and have not too much excess material on the Mini. Makes the steps afterwards a bit easier. Just be careful that you don't clip off anything from the actual miniature. Next up, we will check the parts for mold lines. In case you're wondering what mold lines are, let me explain real quick. Miniatures are made by 2 part molds being pressed together. The plastic gets injected between the 2 halves, and once everything cooled down, you open the 2-part molds and voila, you have the plastic sprue. But depending on the part molds, there might be tiny gaps and plastic gathers there. You see that as mold lines. That is of course a super simplified explanation. You can normally just scrape them away with your hobby knife. GW sells some mold line scrapers, but honestly you don't need them. Just be careful, this is a step that you should do thoroughly. Check out this axe for example, an insane amount of excess plastic. While the mold lines are sometimes hard to see while the Mini is not painted, you will absolutely see them once paint gathers around the mold lines. Once that's done, we take a sharp knife and cut off what's not supposed to be on your model. Normally that's the area where you separated the piece from the sprue. Take your time, you will get rewarded later for being precise. To get a super smooth surface, I like to file the surface a little bit. I have some fine grains for that, I use 1000 to 1500. One thing I will not cover in this video is filling gaps. First of all, gaps do not happen with GW Minis that often, and second, I'm considering doing a separate video for that. Otherwise, the video you're watching right now would be even longer. A separate video with green stuff, sprue glue and sculpting is still on my to-do list. Now, before you glue parts together, always do a dry fit. The plastic glue melts the surfaces together. It's getting a bit messy when you have to separate glued parts and go back to the cutting step. Right here I'm not super happy and do some adjustments. Afterwards, the parts fit so perfectly that it holds even without glue. I work my way through the single pieces, and whenever I build a mini, I try to glue as many parts together as possible. However, there are a few pieces that I never glue on the mini, with some super rare exceptions. Hats and shields never go on the miniature. Painting faces or the areas covered by the shield is insanely annoying, at least in my opinion. Although I tried to fit everything perfectly, I needed to apply quite some pressure on the front and back part of the torso to get a tight fit between the parts. For that I have these little clamps. It doesn't work with all minis, especially when they have spikes in the chest plate for example, but here it's no issue. To protect the mini from any damage, I cut out some kitchen paper to be extra careful. While this dries, I cut out and prepare the other parts. And while I think GW products are most of the time decent and beginner-friendly tools, their plastic glue can be a bit of a... Whenever this metal part gets clogged up, a bit of fire burns the dried up glue into nirvana and you're good to go again. I mean, it's kinda obvious, but I don't wanna be responsible for a house burning down. Only apply this to the tip of the metal and keep the flame away from the liquid glue inside. Kids, ask your parents to help you with that. Now, the cloak is tricky. On one hand, gluing it on the model will block lots of areas of the mini. Painting the armor underneath, the inside of the cloak and the leather belt are just a few examples. But we will have a solution for this in a bit. All parts assembled for final dry fit, and we're looking pretty good. Now, as I said, the hat is something that I never glue on a mini. Well, never say never, I wouldn't do that with monsters for example. So first I cut off the little plastic part underneath. Believe me, you can attach them easily even without that. With my hobby knife I carve a little notch at the bottom of the hat. This little notch helps me to center my hand drill. I drill a 1mm hole into the piece. I regularly check with my finger how deep I'm in. Yeah. Be careful to not drill too far, although you really must be into drilling to go through the whole hat. I even did it with the cloak. I was considering just using blue tack, but that is always a bit too wobbly for me. Whenever you drill parts that are thin, always check the back. The plastic will turn white the moment you're about to drill through the piece. This is your signal to immediately drop the hand drill. I did it off camera because I really needed to be careful with that step. We do the exact same thing with the feet of the mini. Right foot, left foot, done. Now a little extra step. I know almost nobody does that, and honestly I only do it for my special minis like centerpieces or when I participate in my local GW in a painting competition. I have a little bowl of water with some dish soap in it. With a toothbrush I clean the pieces thoroughly. Now you might be asking, why? And you know what? You're not the only one who was asking that.
Wieso machst du das, Papa?
Weil ich darauf gefeilt habe. Wenn man darauf feilt, ja, dann ist da Staub drauf und kleine Teilchen. Und dann hast du das unter der Farbe drunter und dann hast du das Problem, dass das sieht man dann, diese Staubpartikel und die Fäden und alles. Ne? Und deswegen bürste ich das einmal, dann tue ich es unter das Wasser.
Wieso hast du das eigentlich gedingst? Wieso hast du das eigentlich gedingst?
Was gedingst? Meinst du gefeilt?
Ja.
Das habe ich gemacht, weil manchmal sind ja diese Gusslinien, ne? Oder vielleicht gefällt mir was nicht oder steht was weg. Und du weißt ja, wenn man das aus dem Gussrahmen zwickt, dann steht ja auch was weg, ne?
Aber das machst du doch immer weg.
Ja, das mache ich immer weg. Und jetzt habe ich dann noch geguckt hier, dass es extra glatt ist und habe deswegen noch einmal drüber gefeilt, ne?
Damit ist extra. Das ist eine besondere Figur.
Das ist keine besondere Figur, aber ich möchte dir was zeigen, wie man es tun kann. Man muss das nicht machen.
Once the part's dried, I prepared some wire. Don't make that too short and not too long. Too short means you don't get the advantage of easier angles when you paint under the Mini, and when the wire is too long, it will bend when you paint. Put some super glue in the hole and a little bit on the wire. Do not use the GW glue because you do not want to melt the plastic. The super glue is easier to separate from the Mini later. Then combine them. Once that is dry, I mark where I need to drill holes in my base. That is the base that came with the Mini. I'm not too worried about using the base because I will model something on it later anyway. Now you can use cork for that, but cork comes with its own pros and cons, but I will discuss this a little bit later in the video. To give the wire more surface, I attached some sprue parts at the bottom of the base. It's not super necessary, but it definitely helps securing the wire and it lets me sleep better at night. I drill through the base, enter extra sprue and then glue the wire into the base. I let that dry and then I prime it in black and put a zenithal highlight on it. That way I can see where I need to put my highlights later. I suggest taking a picture of that, because later when you have the base coat on it, it might be a little bit difficult to see exactly where the highlights are. Especially when you're new to the hobby or when you struggle a little bit with lighting. Keep in mind that this step might vary depending on how you want to paint later. With for example slab chop, you might want to do it differently. And with that, we are ready to paint. Okay, and we're done with this one. I'm actually pretty happy. The primer, the white one, I think I didn't shake the can enough, but it's not a big deal. So I can access all the parts with my paint. If I wanna paint like the underside of the armor and everything, since the model is elevated from the base, I have an easier time to reach it with the brush, and you can see there is not a lot of bending here, especially when I have two metal rods, then absolutely no problem. I'm happy with that. I have also no issue painting the head like this, because there is no armor. Like sometimes they have these shoulder pads, or they have around the neck some armor. That makes it a little bit tough to paint. So no big deal here as well. And then the cloak, that was a little bit tricky because the cloak is a thin piece, but I'm gonna show you later how you can avoid drilling through your plastic. That is kinda stable. I wouldn't force it too much, but for painting this, it will be really, really great. Now, if you're concerned that you can't get rid of the super glue later on, it's exactly the reason why I glue this with super glue and not the plastic glue. Well, first of all, you have metal there. And second, the super glue is not attacking the Mini itself. The plastic glue from GW is melting it. So normally, I'm not gonna do it right now because I still wanna paint this, you can snap it off, or what you can do is, you take your pliers, take the flat side, go as close to the model as possible, and then you just snip it off. Then you might have to do some cleaning. It's worth it in my opinion. And looking at the hat, I'm super happy with this one. I can just snip off at the base of the hat, or I even keep a little bit of wire because it fits right here in the armor and then it holds the piece better together. All right, okay, I'm gonna show you quickly another one where I will do the Mini of the month. Okay, and here we go. April's free Mini of the month was a Deathwing Knight. I snipped all the parts out of the sprue and took them home with me. Now I'm gonna repeat the steps from the Chaos Champion on this Mini, and here we go. I don't really need to show you every step again, but what I want to show you is that I assembled way less parts. Again, to make painting way easier. The only thing I had to keep in mind is the pose for the highlights. For example, I wanted to have the right arm in a downward striking position. The main body was a regular top-down highlight. I secured that one with 2 wires to guarantee that the Mini wouldn't bounce around while painting. Then I took pictures of the Mini to remember all the highlights and shadows, just in case. The head gets more of a front highlight since that piece will be sitting in the hood-like armor afterwards. And I wanted him to have the shield facing almost completely upwards to defend himself from a Tyrannid jumping on him. I had quite the ambitious plans with this fella. The arms of the Deathwing Knight are perfect for the wire, since they have already holes in the connection area. So again, no magic involved here. I just wanted to show that depending on the Mini, you have to be a little bit flexible with your approach. Yeah, so that was pretty fun too. I'm happy with the result. I have now 5 parts here. I can access all the joints very easily, and you probably don't see this, but the parts have already holes, right? So I can just snap off the metal rod there or clip it off, and there's no problem at all with attaching it to the main body. Now always keep in mind where you drill and where you glue, because afterwards it might be a little bit of a hassle, and then all your work might backfire even. But I'm happy with this. Especially I can paint here the back of the shield, easy peasy. I like it. One thing that we need to talk about though, when it comes to this preparation part, sometimes you prep minis and you know, painting is maybe not your job and you have other things to do. Storing these pieces is important. Because if you do not touch these models or you do not start painting on these models for a while, dust will collect on them, if they're not locked away, obviously. So what I'm doing is, I have here this box here, an old shoe box, and I'm just gonna put the prep minis, prep parts in here. And whenever I feel like, hey, today is a nice day for painting, I get them out and start painting. And when I'm done, I put them back in. That way, the parts are protected. Because if there's a lot of dust on it and then you paint on it, first of all, you will miss some of the dust, you always do. And second, you will see that afterwards. And that would be sad. After all this work, I think I put in almost an hour for each mini just for the prepping, and I don't want any stupid dust to get in my way. If you do not have a shoe box for any case whatsoever, or you want to know how to get rid of the dust the best way, honestly, it's compressed air. You could use one of these makeup brushes and just get it off, but I'm doing it with my airbrush and I just blow the compressed air on it and be happy with it. That's it, we're done with the first part of the video. Super happy with this. Now, of course, if you have an army to paint or to prep, you cannot spend an hour for a mini. To be honest, I think I could do this even faster because, well, I do all the recording at the side, I check the recording, blah, blah, blah. So you at home should do it even faster. Now let's have a look, how can we do this faster? Now let's talk about how can we build an army, not just a single model, fast. Now I'm still doing a few things that you probably can skip, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But now imagine the following, you bought an army and you want to play with your friends. ASAP, right? This weekend. Monday, you bought your army, the weekend you want to play. So obviously you cannot spend almost an hour per model, so we're gonna cut a few corners, and I'm gonna show you this now with, I think they're called 3 Guild steel helmets or something like that, so basic infantry, and here we go.
So the first steps are simple, pliers and get your parts out of the sprue. I like to get all the parts for a complete mini. This might sound stupid, but switching your tools non-stop costs you time as well. So I get all the parts for one mini and then I start getting rid of the excess plastic, every leftover that I couldn't get safely with the pliers, and mold lines in visible places. I also save some time by not drilling holes into the feet and just lifting them up with some parts of the sprue. Because what else are you doing with them, besides making your own sprue glue and some crazy kit bashes? Give your minis some high heels. I drilled 2 things though, and I know that there's an easy mom joke in there, but I'm gonna be nice. One thing is the head and the other one is the shield. Once I'm done with the drill, I take a slice of cork, get some wire and put everything together with super glue. I have to be a bit careful with the shields since they are quite thin, but I can show you what I was talking about earlier. The moment your drill is about to pierce the surface, the plastic will turn white. Don't panic, the surface is still smooth if you pay attention, and you won't see anything after the paint job. Of course you can skip this and just fully assemble the mini. And with a few minutes of work I have one soldier done. However, I got greedy.
Yeah, so I really wanted to put this method to the test, and I went, after assembling the first mini, to my local Games Workshop store and bought more plastic crack. I really wanted to see how fast can I build an army to the point where I would stop and start painting. And it took me like a full afternoon to assemble everything that you see right here. This is 1,000 points of Cities of Sigmar. I have a problem. A serious problem. Now, before we're done with the video, I want to talk about some single units and what I did there. Because I was willing to cut a few corners, but there are a few things that I absolutely do not want to skip.
Building these little stills is really easy, and after the painting, you take your pliers, you get close to the mini and clip it off. Just don't clip off a toe. This is easy to do, and should you hit the shoe itself, you will be able to cover that with your base building later. I paint most hats on a cork wire stand, at least the ones where the faces are not armored. The armored ones, I just put them on the Mini. But I like to paint eyes, and it's just so much easier to paint them when they are not already on the body. The Fusiliers are not on their base yet, because I try to keep brush accessibility in mind. A little detail here, I drilled the barrels. And the reason why I didn't glue them on the base are these shields. It would just be rather annoying painting the area between the shield and the Mini. Of course, this is up to you. And as I said, I did cut some corners. My Marshal, for example, is fully assembled. Cities of Sigma will be an army where I'm not going for the most insane paint jobs. I just want them to look nice from half a meter away. So I will be fine. Same with the cavalry. First of all, I picked the helmets with armor, so the face doesn't matter. And on top, their weapons are not super close to the torso. However, I will absolutely regret putting the shields on them already. If I would go for a better paint job, I would put them on a regular base first and not a cavalry base. The cavalry base blocks a lot of angles for your brush and makes painting some areas of the horse annoying. The cannon though, my lord, I love this model. So I decided that this model will get a better paint job than the others. That means going back to the method that I described at the beginning of the video. Have stuff pinned on wire and not everything glued together, so I can access all the little nooks and recesses. I might make some mistakes here and there, for example the pistols are still missing the barrel holes, but it's not a big deal. So I definitely put this method to the test, and you can assemble 1, probably even 2k points in a single afternoon/evening combo. Just keep in mind that it also depends a little bit on which army you play. Some elite armies, like Chaos or Stormcasts, you don't have a lot of minis to assemble, and when you play a horde army, like with 100 zombies for example, then you might be in trouble.
Yeah, and with that we're at the end of the video. Now I have to paint all of this. Probably gonna try some contrast paints for the first time ever. And you know what? I hope this video was helpful for you. Whether you're like first time miniature painter, or if you're a veteran and you just wanna check, did I miss anything? Or hey, this guy has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. In that case, maybe you can drop in the comment section more tips and tricks how to prep your minis. I know there's stuff like blue tack, but I'm not the biggest fan of that. But yeah, I will definitely see that in the comment section. As always, the annoying YouTuber begging at the end. If you enjoyed this video, maybe like and subscribe. I try to do more videos this year, be it painting, be it tutorials, be it, I don't know, anything that crosses my mind, because I'm just enjoying this so much. Also, otherwise the little nerdling is gonna cry, and you don't want that, am I right? I also hope I can find some time to actually make painting videos about the mini of the month and my Chaos champion. Probably don't have the time to make videos for this, but maybe I share on my socials some picture once this is done. So 2025. And with that, I wish you a nice day, and let's roll the outro.
Another video in the bag, so let's get to work for the next one. Next project will be a painting video for sure. As always, a big shout out to my patrons for supporting me over on, well, you guessed it already, Patreon. You guys are too generous. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching, as always. If you feel like it, check out my link tree in the description. You might find something fun. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, have a good day and bye bye.